Welcome back to AP U.S. History. This is part three of dealing with politics of the Gilded Age. Uh, as we recap of what we talked about, um, after the Civil War, with the start of Grant all the way up to the 20th century, um, which is going to be Teddy Roosevelt that will usher in the 20th century, um, pretty uneventful politics. Republicans are going to dominate the presidency. Um, the only president that's going to be elected at the last half of the 19th century is Cleveland. He's going to be elected in 1884 and then again in 1892. He was a fiscal conservative. He vetoed a lot of legislation he thought was inflationary, unnecessary spending. One of the reasons that Republicans seem to dominate the White House is they would wave the bloody shirt, which simply blamed the Civil War on the Confederates and all the blood that was shed, and somehow that disqualified a Democrat from holding the White House. Um, One of the most significant things that's going to happen during this period of time um, is that the civil service system is going to be revamped. The Pendleton Act of is going to be passed, which will require that civil servant workers working in the executive branch must take a test. By 1900, 50% of the civil service workers are there by merit or by test. There are three groups within the Republican Party: the stalwarts, the half-breeds, and the mugwumps. Mugwumps being the most liberal, still caring about taking care of African American rights, and wanted to see the end of political corruption. They were in favor of the Pendleton Civil Service Act, or the Pendleton Act. They saw that as a significant piece of legislation passed in 1887. We also are going to look at some regulations placed on business towards the end of the 1900s, and this is going to be the Interstate Commerce Act, passed to regulate prices of railroads. We will see the Sherman Antitrust Act passed, again trying to regulate monopolies, trusts in America. Big business operates under a system of laissez-faire, not much interference from the government. No personal income taxes are raised from these mighty industrialists, and so this is a very favorable business climate. And the mugwumps, because of their disapproval of political corruption, will turn to Cleveland, who they believe will clean up the civil service and make it more competitive and do away with corruption in government. They weren't interested in other social and economic reforms. They were primarily interested in political corruption. They had a laissez-faire attitude. They felt that government should not favor anyone, big business or the little one. Chester Arthur is going to take over, and we talked about the Pendleton Act of 1883. My correction there, not 1887. Anyway, this prohibited hiring office holders on the basis of wealth and position. It was supposed to be on a merit system. A Civil Service Commission is established to regulate jobs in the government. By 1884, nearly 10% of federal workers are considered classified or taking a test. When you consider that the spoils system started by Jackson, this is a step in the right direction, I believe. Here's Chester Arthur posing, they feel, as a stalwart, but in fact, during his administration, he will sign into law the Pendleton Act of 1883. And so considered the Magna Carta, and more people are given tests to get jobs in the federal government. We also talked about the politics of the Gilded Age being equally divided between the Democrats and the Republicans, but the Republicans carrying enough electoral votes to maintain control of the White House. Grover Cleveland is going to be the first president elected on the Democratic ticket in over 28 years. We go back to 1856 was the last Democrat who was elected into office. The Dawes Act is passed, considered a landmark in terms of assimilating Native Americans into the culture. The Interstate Commerce Act we talked about, regulating big business. Baines runs against Cleveland, but because the Republican Party is split on its votes, Cleveland will become president of the United States. And we talked about Cleveland having a supposed illegitimate child and mudslinging in that campaign. He was considered a president that vetoed a lot of legislation as a governor and also as a president. Anything that he saw as extravagant expense, he wasn't going to vote for it. He was going to veto it. And some hailed him as a defender of democracy and fiscal management. When he leaves office in 1888, there's a surplus of $100 million, which is a significant amount for that period of time. After the Civil War, Congress raised tariffs to protect new U.S. industries. Big business wanted to continue this practice because it made them more money. In 1885, the tariff earned United States $100 million in surplus. Mugwumps were opposed to any kind of interference by the government. Cleveland's view on the tariff, he was be considered a moderate. Tariff will become a major issue in the campaign of 1888, and he will come on the wrong side of this and lose the White House because of this. And so it was a big issue, and Harrison, who's running against Cleveland, is going to be supportive of a higher tariff to protect American workers and American industry. And again, Cleveland being a moderate on this. So people vote their pocketbooks, and they believe that Harrison is going to protect more American jobs, industrial jobs, than Cleveland. The smallest specimen yet, well, a reference to Harrison as an insignificant president. This shows the election results of 1888. And Cleveland will lose, but come back in 1892 and win the presidency. He can always be hailed as someone who created a surplus, but Harrison is going to be someone who's going to drain the treasury, according to some. Some people are very upset with the government in terms of dealing with corruption and abuse to workers and the environment and consumers, and they want the powers of these big businesses curved. And the Interstate Commerce Act, the Sherman Antitrust Act, are going to be two things that are going to try to regulate big business. The McKinley Tariff of 1890 was based on the idea that Americans would prosper if they had a protective tariff. It increased the already high tariff by another 4%, which it made it very difficult to buy things overseas because they were so expensive. The Republican Party suffered a big losses in the 1890. Even McKinley lost the House seats when he was president. And this shows presidential election of Cleveland in 1892, mainly because there was an economic downturn. And this shows Cleveland again carrying enough votes from the South and Republicans to win the White House. He was the only president to serve 2 terms non-consecutively. Some blame the Panic of 1893 as a reason why he lost the election. That and his stance on tariffs. Defended the gold standard. Used federal troops in 1894 to break up the Pullman strike in Chicago. He refused to sign the William Gorman tariff of 1894 because he thought that would be a burden on the workers. It's sort of a mixed bag. He thought it would hurt the economy. He repealed the Sherman Silver Purchase Act, which many in America were hoping that there would be a silver standard rather than a gold standard. And that's the end, and we'll say goodnight.